Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Comprehensive Learner Record Roundtable. Today we're going to be focusing on tools to support your CLR initiative, so hopefully you're ready and excited for this conversation on this Monday morning. Before we get started, I'm going to just launch a quick poll just to get a good idea of who's in our audience today so we can make sure we're meeting your needs and kind of understanding the background you come from so we can make sure we're addressing that information for you. So if you could take a minute and do that poll for me, that would be great. While you do the poll, I'd like to just thank some of our sponsors that have helped support our digital credentials initiative work. The CLR Roundtable is one of the many things we're doing in the digital credential space, and these 5 sponsors include APHIS, Badger, Campus Labs, Credly, and Walmart Organization. So those 5 institutions are helping to support IMS Global in our work to support digital credentials for our institutions. And then with that, I will introduce our speakers today. I'll actually give you a little more background on the IMS Roundtable. So this is a monthly event, so if this is the first one you're joining, welcome. We are really focusing on building a community to help you guys implement a CLR, learn more about it, figure out what you need to do to get your initiative off the ground and moving. Today's will be a little bit more tactical in how you implement and how you work with partners to do some of that. If you've missed some of our previous ones, those are also all available on our CLR event page, so you can go back and watch any of the previous sessions that may be of interest to you. And so really this is a time for community, so make sure you're using the chat to ask questions. Later on we'll have time for Q&A. If you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, you're welcome to do that. So make sure you're thinking about what you have and ask those questions as we go. I will be moderating those, so I'll get them to our presenters at the appropriate time. We've got a couple places built in, but if it makes sense to ask it at the moment, I will do that. And then just so we know, I will share the results of who's in our audience today. So today we have mainly the information technology side and registrars with a few others that are there to help support, which is a pretty good indicator based on this topic and what we were expecting. And then most of you are still in that investigation stage. A few are in the process of implementing. So if you've got tips or tricks you've learned, feel free to share those with us later. And then some of you have a platform already picked, others are still in that investigation space. So thank you for coming today. So with that, now I'll introduce our speakers today. So we have Clint McElroy from the Indiana University, who's been implementing CLR, so he's got his story to share. And then we have Jeff Bohrer, who's our technical program manager here at IMS. So he'll share some good information and background on what you need to know to make it successful. So with that, I think I turn it over to Jeff.
Thanks, Kelly. Hello, everyone. Great to see such a wonderful turnout for even a technical focused topic, which is a bit of a deviation from the previous CLR roundtables that we've had, but I'm really glad you took time out of your day to join us, and I hope you get a lot of valuable information from this. Just to set the stage, the Comprehensive Learner Record is a standard for expressing official records of learning achievements of all types. So the use cases that have been analyzed by IMS members over the last few years that have led to the publishing of the IMS CLR standard have focused on 3 main areas: K-12 learning achievements, higher education learning achievements, and workplace-based learning records and achievements. And so, of course, today's session is focused on higher education. In many ways, the use cases and implementations coming out of higher ed are a few steps ahead of the other areas. And we'll be joined by one of those early adopters in just a few minutes to talk about their experience preparing their data, preparing their systems, and working with their vendor partner to implement the CLR standard. So the CLR really is designed to be part of a bigger learning ecosystem around digital credentials. The CLR is designed to support, as I mentioned, learning achievements of all types, not just courses and grades, but also competencies and skills, alternative credentials like certificates and digital badges, and be able to get those records into the hands of the student who is then able to share those verifiable records or credentials with others, mainly future employers or future educational institutions. So there's a number of characteristics that make CLR unique. We'll get to that in just a moment. But I wanted to emphasize that data interoperability is really essential in this emerging world of digital credentials. So what I mean by the data interoperability is that when we have multiple systems, both producing CLR data in its standard form and consuming CLR in its standard form, then we have true interoperability. That truly is when we have a coherent ecosystem where the learner is in the middle of receiving their learning records and sharing them with others. And then we have, we'll be able to truly have a machine readable ecosystem as well that takes advantage of today's computing power and sophistication to analyze the data in those records and open up opportunities for learners, particularly for future employment. So I mentioned that the CLR is designed to be an official record, in this case coming from an institution of higher education. It's designed to capture achievements and competencies within the context of a learning experience. So the way the standard is designed, it's not necessarily designed to capture every data point about a particular learner, but rather focused on their learning achievements that they've accumulated and acquired. Again, it's designed to be transferable between organizations because it's based on an open standard for data interoperability. It's been designed to be immutable so that verification can occur both on the package as a whole and at the individual achievement level of detail. And then importantly, the achievements on the record can contain badges, and specifically open badges, but it can also contain plenty of other learning achievements that are not badged. So the current status of the Comprehensive Learner Record 1.0 standard is that it is published. It's publicly available now. We have a wave of early adopters currently implementing this standard into their platforms, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. And you know, it's good to know that the CLR 1.0 standard entails both a data model, sometimes called an information model, and the REST API, which is important for exchanging the data itself between systems. We'll take a look in just a moment, but the URL to pay attention to is the one on the screen. This imsglobal.org/CLR is the homepage for everything that we have related to resources around the CLR standard. You may have seen earlier this year, in May, ACRO concluded a review of the CLR 1.0 standard and came out with recommendations for post-secondary institutions that are working on projects regarding new forms of learner records. And I'm pleased to also announce that the ACRO board has created a new working group to of its ACRO members to produce an implementation guide for higher education institutions. So that work is just getting underway, but we're excited to see where that's heading. I think the end result will be a very useful publication to help guide institutions transition to adopting this standard. All right, here's the list of early adopter institutions that we're aware of right now and their technology partners. So we're very pleased to see that this list has been growing over the recent months, and IMS is in a position to support the adoption of their of the standard into their platforms. Okay, so one of these early adopters is Indiana University. Very pleased to transition over to Clint McElroy, who is going to describe his role and the work that his organization did to not only roll out a CLR project on their campus, but roll out a CLR project that has also implemented the CLR 1.0 data standard. Clint?
All right, well, thanks for having me here to share our story of incorporating the CLR into our first year Hoosier Experience Achievement Award. So if you go to the next slide. So the Hoosier Experience, it is a program on the Indiana University Bloomington campus. And the goal is to link students to events outside the classroom and increase student engagement and enhance their first year experience. So at the events, they can discover new resources, learn something new, meet new people. There's events about, say, degree programs, art, yoga, etc. And at the end of the semester or the end of the academic year, if a student has attended 6 or more of these events, we award them the Achievement Award, which you can see on the right. So if we go to the next slide. So why did we choose the CLR standard? Well, we had a couple things going on. First, the Hoosier Experience Award, it was already an existing program, but we needed to add more data. So we wanted to know, what day were these events and what were these events about? So we needed to add that data. And at the same time, Mark McConaughey, our registrar and associate vice provost at the Bloomington campus, he was also looking for a pilot program for the CLR. And so they just kind of worked out to where this would be a good fit. We already have the Hoosier Experience working, and so we didn't need to develop every single piece over again. We already had a front end and the business process to actually get that data to our vendor paradigm. And then also it was a smaller scale. Coming from the registrar's office, we don't have the resources that our university-wide IT service has. So doing something smaller scale that already had a lot of existing processes in place allowed us to do it more quickly. And then, so our vendor was also willing to learn the CLR with us, and that was a big part. We weren't doing it entirely alone. And we wanted the flexibility of the CLR. So we didn't want to put all this work into something and then really not be able to use it somewhere else. And there's also the portability of it. So having it portable means that our students, our vendor paradigm, and IU itself, they're not locked into a custom built solution. So having a CLR, it's portable, has data standards, has REST API, so we can actually generate this data on our end, give it to the student can take it wherever they would like to take it. And Paradigm, if they want to work with other institutions, they already have the framework to do so. And on the same note, IU does as well. So if we go to the next slide, please. So how did we get started? In some ways, this was actually not too hard. So we already had the existing Hoosier Experience in place. So we already knew what was working and what we needed to add. And then we also had Paradigm, who was willing to work with us. So we had all the parties willing to work together. And I lost my train of thought. So basically, we already had a lot of committed parties to it. And we also noticed that it was very complex. So we needed to establish communication pretty early in the project. So we worked with IMS, we worked with Paradigm, and just to try and understand what this standard really, what it can do and what it maybe can't do. So some of the questions that kind of came up early on is, what is the structure of the JSON LD payload? What kind of attributes are required, which aren't? Where can we even find the IMS schema definition for the JSON LD payload? Or how do we accurately map our data? So those are some of the early questions that we had to really answer. So like many of you have probably done, we've started reading the documentation over and over and over. And eventually we came to the realization that the blueprint for our data structures were really in the standard. So the specifications tend to use object classes to really define some of these things, like the CLR the profile, assertions, achievements, etc. But if we abstract that a little bit, we can kind of think about the classes as just tables in a database. So that helped us to really get our back end going. And in doing so, that gives us the flexibility of using this in other projects. And so the next part is, I'm sorry, go back one more. Yeah, so we got the data mapped, we got our backend built, and the next part was trying to build out how to deliver the JSON LD payload to our vendor paradigm. And this had one of the more interesting struggles here. So we had some issues of actually transmitting data that had non-UTF-8 characters. So we were able to, eventually resolve that by escaping or replacing certain characters. Any data guys out there know that the curly double quotes are always an issue. So just to say that delivering the payload was a little interesting. So if we go to the next slide. And so where are we at now? After about 9 months of part-time development between another developer and myself, we went live in March. And on the right, you can see what paradigm will render to the student or the person looking at the achievement award. And at the bottom, you can see events that it'll expand to include details about that event. So it's a really slick interface. And then also we now have a backend in place. So we can now scale this to future projects. And we now have a very good understanding of the CLR standard. If we go next slide, please. So our next steps are to achieve full compliance with the CLR standard. So for instance, we still need to include the verification pieces inside the JSON LD payload and also the REST JSON binding web services. So we still need to get those in place and a few other smaller things, but by and large, we're there with the back end and we're able to apply this to the next project and work towards that full certification. And so with that, we're still looking for new projects to do that. And it's been a good experience. It's very flexible, and we're excited to see what else it can do for our students. So with that, I thank you for your time.
Hey, Clint, this is Jeff from IMS. I had a question for you. I think we have a couple minutes for Q&A, right, Kelly?
Yep, you've got time.
I was thinking about your first time as you and your team took a look at the CLR standard. Did you have any sort of moments of realization that eased your understanding? Do you have any tips for newcomers who are taking a look at the specification documents for the first time?
The big realization that really, so I worked on the back end mostly, and the biggest realization that helped me was that the standards, the specifications, really do show kind of the structure of the database, because obviously moving data from one database to another, from one platform to another, is a big challenge. So having that kind of guidance on what a backend kind of looks like, realizing that all these different classes of assertions, achievements really are just like tables. We have one-to-one relationships or one-to-many relationships, and having that structure gave us a place to really start pulling in our data to see how it's going to really apply to the CLR standard.
Great, thanks.
So we have another question from the chat is, how reusable is what you built, Clint. So you've put all this work into it. How reusable is it if you want to use it for a different
Mhm.
project or a different vendor?
It's very reusable. So we tried being very faithful to what the specifications say. So, we did add some extra columns to our tables to make it easier to query our data, or to link it to university internal data attributes. So we have, our own internal university IDs, things of that nature. So it's written to be sort of agnostic to IU or a vendor. So we believe it's very extensible as it's written right now. We may not keep it in the same schema, but it's written in a way that it's not strictly for the Hoosier experience.
That's great. Does anybody else have a question they want to ask of Clint now? Otherwise, we'll have time later too. We have another question about who will be consuming or using the CLR that you're generating, Clint.
So the main consumer right now is Paradigm, our vendor, and they're using the JSON to populate the scholar record that we saw on the previous slide. But the student can also download that CLR. I don't know how many services are out there right now that can consume the CLR, but they are able to download that and share it as they would like to.
Great. I think that's it for now for questions. Jeff, if you want to go to your section.
Sure, thanks, Clint. My portion is to share with you all the resources that are available through IMS to get you started on your CLR implementation project. There's a number of different types of resources that I'm going to walk through over the next few minutes. We won't go into great detail on any of them, but there will be a bunch of URLs that my colleague Kelly will be putting in the chat. So don't feel like you have to necessarily screen capture everything, but just grab the links out of the chat. The whole point here is that IMS and its members don't just build these specification documents and put them on a shelf, but we're very invested in the implementation process. And so we invest in the creation of tools to help enable the adoption of these standards. Some of them are prototype tools. Some of them are what we call reference implementations, where you can test your system against our systems. And we'll walk through a number of these resources here in just a second. Okay, so first of all, like I mentioned earlier, the main landing page or homepage for IMS's work on the CLR is this one here, imsglobal.org/CLR. On this page, you'll find links to all the technical documentation. You'll find links to the developer tools that I'll show in just a moment. You'll find news and updates coming from other parts of IMS that may relate to digital credentials in this regard. So please make note of the /CLR URL that I just mentioned. So beyond just the specification documents that include detailed documents about the CLR data model and the REST-based API that Clint mentioned, we also have documents called an implementation guide that has been put together by the CLR technical work group comprised of contributing members to IMS. And that is an ongoing living document. A first draft is available right now. It may not be entirely complete to meet all of your needs, but it's a very good starting point for understanding the components of the CLR standard and how to implement it. There's also what we call a conformance certification guide that provides information on how products who adopt the CLR standard can go through the conformance testing process and receive certification from IMS that their product is conformant. Then there's some other resources like an open API view of the service information, the service model. There's also the JSON schema and the JSON LD context files available to help that you can use. And I wanted to point you to a very helpful recorded webinar that was done by our digital credentials architect, Andy Miller. Andy, I see you're on the call. Thank you for putting this video together. It's about a half hour, and it's a very detailed walkthrough of the CLR 1.0 standard and some of the other tools that are available for you to test your products. So very excited to make this available. It can save a lot of time and really point you in the right direction and orient you in your understanding of CLR 1.0. Okay, so I mentioned some of the prototype and reference implementation applications that are available. We do this to help spur adoption and for you to test your implementations of the standard. And so there's two types of applications that are available on this page, dc.imsglobal.org. The first type are what we call reference implementations, and those are tools that play the opposite role of your system. So let's take Clint's example at Indiana, for example. If they are the CLR data provider, and they're assuming one part of the data exchange process, they can integrate and test their system with the opposite complementary system on the data consuming side using one of our reference implementations. So they can interact and ensure that the data can interoperate successfully using the reference implementations. Now there's also two other types of apps that we call prototype apps. I'll start with the CLR Builder. The CLR Builder is a web-based application that allows you to create the underlying JSON by filling out a series of web forms and populating a sample CLR with your data and seeing what the JSON output looks like on the backside. That's the CLR Builder. And the CLR Wallet is an application that allows you to test your CLR JSON data file or by connecting to a CLR providing service. And the CLR Wallet renders a student CLR, in a rudimentary, visually attractive kind of display, not as beautiful as the one that Indiana has produced, but the CLR Wallet is kind of a prototype tool for seeing how that JSON data can be rendered in a web page. Now these applications are available to IMS members typically. But what we did through this series of CLR Roundtables is we wanted to make these tools available to you that attended the Roundtable webinars, and we can do that by just requesting access. So right now they're behind an IMS account. If you fill out this simple form here at bit.ly/IMS access request, our team will set you up with a free IMS account and get you access to those protected prototype and reference implementation apps. Okay, so here's a look at the CLR Builder. Again, it's a web-based form that walks you through creating each of the key data objects that comprise a CLR, from profiles and achievements and assertions to endorsements and associations between those achievements. So by simply filling out the data in a web form style, you'll be able to produce a valid CLR JSON package. And here's what the CLR Wallet looks like. I mentioned it's just kind of a rudimentary rendering environment, but it's remarkably done well, and it really crystallizes the understanding of what the CLR data can look like. So in this case, I logged in and I have 3 different CLR files that have been issued to me from 3 different CLR issuing organizations. And this is just the very top screen of what one of those CLRs looks like. There's some basic information about the package. It has the verification functionality built in. There's information about the learner and the organization that serves as the role of the publisher of the CLR. And then just before the screen cut off, there's the list of the achievement assertions that have been awarded to me. In this case, it's a certificate. And if I were to drill in, yeah, I didn't get a screenshot of that, but furthermore, into the certificate, there's more metadata about all the achievements that comprised my earning of that certificate. So the wallet is a great tool for just, visualizing the data that's in your CLR file. There's a new resource coming from IMS that's intended to help institutions work through their RFI or RFP process as well. This is a document called Procurement Guidance for CLR Systems. And what it does is it just provides a little bit of information about the CLR standard. And then it has some details, some sample language that can be used in RFPs, and also some sample requirements for a CLR-based system. So not all the content here may be applicable to your project, but it's a starting point for at least understanding maybe all the different features that can be available in a CLR compliant system. And so it's really focused on equipping institutions to understand the various functions, features, and putting it in a language that might be reusable for official RFP documents. Okay, that concludes the walkthrough of all the resources that are available to you and your organization as you work to implement the standard. Maybe I'll pause here before we jump into the information about the next session. Are there questions about either Indiana's experience working to implement the standard, or any of the tools available to you?
So we have a couple questions that have come in.
Great.
So one is, how does this differ from a portfolio product?
Yeah, right. That's a very good question. A portfolio is a student, self-curated folder of their artifacts. The CLR is actually designed to be an official record from the institution, similar to a transcript, but at this point not replacing the transcript in any way. But this is a record of achievement data. It can include courses and grades, but it can include diplomas, awarded certificates, minors, co-curricular experiences, leadership positions, Dean's List awards, you name it. It's quite flexible and quite structured for communicating all of these, what we call achievements. We can't quite find a better word than achievements that are related to the learning experience. And learning, we know is happening all over campus in many different experiences, and off campus as well. So that's what it's been designed for.
And then we had another question about the Open Skills Network. Maybe explain what that is for those who don't, but then also that Open Skills Network references an LER and an ILR, and are they the same as a CLR?
Right, good question. I need to not take the position of explaining the Open Skills Network. I'm still learning about that. But in terms of how the CLR fits in with the LER and ILR, so LER, Learning and Employment Record, is the newest phrase that's coming out of the US federal government for new forms of records of this type. ILR was their previous term. It tripped up a lot of people. And so, the federal government, US Chamber of Commerce, are facilitating a number of projects to further the ecosystem of learning and employment records. The CLR is the only standard that actually discusses the payload, the packaging of these achievement records. A lot of the technologies right now that are part of the LER project are containers that are used to ship various credentials from one platform to another. And they have a place, but the CLR actually goes deeper and describes the data components, all the classes and objects that Clint was just illustrating. And it also provides the ability for systems to ingest, consume the data at the granular achievement level. So the CLR is an LER, but it serves a very unique purpose, which is capturing in fine detail those learning achievements on the record.
If you have any other questions, make sure to put them in the chat, or if you want to grab a mic and ask a question, you're welcome to do that too. Pause for a second if anybody wants to do that. All right, in addition to that, some questions that have come up at earlier roundtables are really, is this going to replace a transcript at an institution? Jeff, do you want to just touch on that topic?
Well, that's not up to IMS to decide whether
yeah.
it's going to replace the transcript. I think if institutions are interested in that, well, we'll let them explore. But it's a natural question. The use cases that led to the publishing of CLR 1.0 were not intended to replace the transcript at this point. So it's possible. I mentioned the ACRO implementation guide work group that's just getting started. May investigate that question and provide some guidance to campuses down the road, but I don't even want to say that that's going to be a deliverable of their work at this point. It's a little too early to say.
Yeah, and we're seeing most institutions right now doing them as a complement to the transcript is kind of what we've seen so far out of higher education. But that,
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah, it's really based on a secondary transcript idea, a supplementary transcript, experiential learning records are what some campuses call it. It's a way to document and capture and validate through verifiable records these other competencies and skills and experiences that students pick up during their time.
And I would also say, kind of tying into the idea of a portfolio, you could use a CLR to supplement, say, a transcript or a degree. And to my understanding, the CLR allows for actually including, non-text, components. So for instance, you could encode a PDF into it or an image. So if you're, say, like an art student, you want to have, an art piece that you did, you could include that, or say a thesis. From my understanding, it does allow that. So it's a good way to supplement things like a transcript or a degree, a diploma.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's called evidence, and evidence can be included into these achievement assertions optionally. Not every achievement is it's appropriate for that, but it is a wonderful way to augment the record, and providing it in a machine readable format, frankly. The question about portfolio tools kind of came up, and so it does beg the question of what are the differences between portfolios and CLRs. But CLR is a way to structure all of that information, including optional evidence about that achievement. I see a question from Simona. Hi, Simona. Can I reiterate the differences, similarities between open badges and CLRs? Yeah, great question. So first of all, the data model for the CLR drew heavily from the existing data model for open badges, because in the way that, one way to look at this is the open badge is a singular achievement, and the CLR is the collection of achievements that can include open badges, but not necessarily open badges. So for platforms that are building tools to manage CLRs, some of them also have badging functionality. So they'll see some harmony between those two data standards. And again, achievements in a CLR can be badges. There are ways to include the open badges data model within the CLR. Again, you can also have all sorts of verifiable achievement assertions that don't require the badging component to it. So some of the similarities are that, you know, open badges support verification, open badges support evidence. So do the achievement assertions that are found on a CLR record.
I'm just going to jump back to our previous question about transcript versus CLR. Tom Green from ACRO chimed in the chat, and I'm just going to read it because there's a few people who are connected, I think, just via the phone. So from ACRO's perspective, they see this as a great complement to a transcript. This is another way to reflect what occurs at a college or technical learning experience, but transmits the information in a way that focuses on what was learned, not what was taken. So we still need transcripts within higher education, but few outside it find value in that document. So from ACRO's perspective, that's their comment.
Thanks, Tom, and feel free to grab the mic if you want to expound on that.
He was having some connection issues, so he was going to stay in the chat. But
fair enough.
We do, I think our very first roundtable had Tom and Jeff talking about CLR, and it covered some of that a little bit more in depth. So if you want to go back and review that, you're welcome to as well. Any other questions? I'll leave the chat open, or if you want to grab the mic, you can. While we're waiting to see if any other questions come in, I'll just highlight kind of what's next for the roundtable series. So traditionally, we've been doing these at the end of the month, but we're going to mix it up a little bit on our next one. So we're actually moving to November 2nd for our next roundtable event. And this one will be really around the theme of how can a CLR contribute to your diversity and equity goals at an institution. So we're going to have a group of speakers who will talk to what they've seen, what their plans are, kind of how that work can be supported. So if you're interested, the registration link is up. Otherwise, you're welcome to register at any point for that next event on November 2nd. If you have any feedback or suggestions or have a story to tell that you would like to see featured at an upcoming event or an upcoming roundtable, I encourage you to submit this short Google form. So if you have feedback on this event or have questions you want answered on a future event, or if you have a project underway and you have a story to share with your colleagues, feel free to fill that form out so we can get in contact with you.
And I would add, anyone working on CLR related projects who are interested in adopting the standard, reach out to IMS. We're more than happy to help and to support your goals.
I would echo that. All of those links were pasted in the chat. I will also make sure they're available as I do the follow-up message to those who've attended. I'll make sure to include all those resources for you. The presentation slides and the recording will also be posted to that event page later this week. So thank you everyone for taking the time today to join our roundtable. Have a great rest of the week.